existence, fur and furs represented warmth to us. So someone that was biologically conditioned or programmed to regard this substance, this arrangement of molecules in space, as something bad or to be avoided, froze to death because they would not wear fur. They were just, it's gross. It felt bad on it. It looked bad. They didn't like it. Whereas everyone that found this arrangement of matter and energy pleasing to the eyes was more likely to wear it, and therefore did not freeze to death. They survived. Then they had more kids, and they passed on those genes that made this a delightful looking substance. And obviously that stuff passes into other things. Our enjoyment of certain textures and fabrics and these types of things are generally just sort of crossed wires in our evolutionary programming to regard certain substances as good or bad. Now, of course, that brings us to a chicken or egg type question of what came first. Was it the fact that this stuff is beneficial for us and therefore we evolved to like it, or we liked it and it was beneficial to us and therefore we evolved to like it more? I'm not really sure. I tend to think it is more for us. It originates in us, and then we're essentially just figuring out what stuff works and what doesn't, and therefore the stuff that we like a lot, it's because that, it's been trialed and errored over the course of hundreds of thousands of years, and now we've got a pretty good bearing on that kind of stuff. So, ASMR, where does that come from? Now, I actually probably, certainly, have what is a divisive or perhaps controversial opinion in the ASMR community as to its origins. But I must admit that I am approaching this from an evolutionary psychology standpoint and viewpoint, which does mean that pretty much everything is in service of reproduction. Now, we could say that reproduction is not sexual in nature, which I would tend to obviously disagree with because it is, but when we're talking about sexual things, it's actually more of a current modern perspective that sex is not linked up with reproduction. That's a very modern viewpoint that is totally valid, well, more valid nowadays than it was hundreds of thousands of years ago when we're evolving all of these psychological modules that are now running in our brains. So because of that, you have to approach ASMR from that perspective of 200,000 years ago. We're living in small 100, 200 person tribes, and every single person that you are going to come into contact with are either going to be, fairly close relatives of yours, or they're trying to kill you. They're trying to kill you and take your stuff. So, where does the phenomenon of ASMR, or, the tingly feeling, what evolutionary biological utility does that have? My hypothesis is that it is a physical signifier to an individual, you in this case, the audience, the person who is hopefully experiencing that tingly sensation. That sensation is pleasurable because it is signifying to you that I am signaling the markers for kindness and comfort, intimacy, which you would be seeking in someone for some sort of, I tend to think, generally reproductive means. That is my general idea. Now, that essentially does point out that ASMR is, in origin and in essence, it is actually sexual. Now, here's the thing. That is the controversial part. The non-controversial part here is that ASMR, what I'm doing right now, this is not sexual. In no way, shape, or form does this have any sexual connotations. And in fact, I would say many creators of this type of stuff either go out of their way or just organically make stuff that is totally non-sexual in nature. And therefore, the audience is not necessarily sexualizing it. Neither are the creators. There are some people who are doing that, but we tend to lump them into another category, which I'm fine with. But this does raise the question of, if something is sexual in origin, is it sexual in all of its permutations down the line? So this is basically asking about whether or not it is right and correct to label ASMR as, a porn kind of a thing. I think we've also muddied the waters a lot on the word porn and pornography. Like, oh hey, we've got cooking porn, we've got bread porn, we've got, satisfying, wax break, all of these types of things. We refer to them as porn because they are, viscerally satisfying visual media, which I suppose was generally always thought of as the realm of porn, as opposed to other visual media that is attempting to display beauty, which is a different thing than that visceral feeling of pleasure, that physical sensation that pornography gives you. And therefore other things of a visual media that give you that visceral sensation, we tend to just lump in with porn. I don't think that's necessarily fair, but I'm not here to debate that because the colloquial use of that is already there. There's nothing to be done about it. That's unfortunately just the way it is. Because of that, the waters are muddied enough that you could, in that colloquial sense, call ASMR porn. Now, most people don't want to be associated with porn, and therefore they're very quick to push back on that and go, no, ASMR's not porn. I personally don't care one way or the other, but I can understand why some people don't want to be lumped in that bag. That being said, I don't think when we're talking about ASMR as being sexual, I don't think that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about it in that colloquial sense of, oh, this is porn. No, we are, many people, recognizing that the tingly sensation you're getting, it kind of has a sexual feeling to it, It does. Now, that's gross to say. It really is. It's gross to say. It's gross to consider. Because, look, I'm not watching ASMR for that reason. I'm watching it because it's good background noise. In fact, I'm not even really watching it. I'm just listening to it. But other people are watching it, and, it's not, porn. But it is a weird thing. And again, this is where I would say this is another one of those moments of evolutionary wires get crossed. And we sync up any physical, visceral feeling of pleasure with kind of the only physical feeling of pleasure that actually makes importance to us as reproductive creatures, which is, sex and that kind of stuff. That is unfortunate, but it is just a general byproduct of the fact that we are biological creatures, and that is reproduction. Evolutionary biology speaking, is the ultimate and only goal of life, is to pass on your genes in such a way that those genes will be passed on more successfully the next go around, and to keep going and going and going and going and going forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. That means that everything is inherently sexual, and this is kind of where you get into that trope of everything evolutionary, everything psychological, biologically psychological, is sexual in nature. Now, I do tend to agree with that because that does seem to be borne out by the data. However, I will have to say that some things are a little bit closer and, more proximate to that explanation and origin than other things. This ASMR in general probably is more along those lines. It probably is more along those lines of identifying someone that can be kind and intimate, someone that you would allow to whisper into your ears at night. Now, who's doing that in a tribe of 100, 200 people? Not everybody's doing that. You're allowing very few people to do that. And in fact, you're really probably only allowing 1 or 2 people to do that. It's probably not going to be your parents, certainly not, later on in life, maybe as a child, but we generally don't really think of ASMR as associated with children. Well, okay, maybe I don't know. But basically, yeah, we think of it as more associated with adults because, that's kind of the only people who are in this space. Now, maybe that's, just a sort of logistical reality in that, okay, kids are not necessarily recording things as much. That's not true. That's totally not true. What am I talking about? But, well, yeah, I guess they're not necessarily recording stuff of a high enough quality that they're getting huge amounts of views, although I have seen a bunch of kids with larger ASMR channels than mine, so, to each their own, I guess. That being said, you do have to view this in the context of this small tribal association, and therefore your parents, having a pleasurable feeling by, having your parents whisper in your ears is not actually all that biologically useful, because you're already going to implicitly trust your parents, because guess what? They have an implicit, obvious stake in you surviving. And they've got all kinds of neurological mechanisms to make dang well sure that they try their absolute level best to make sure you survive. And therefore, you trusting them trusting, well, them not trusting you, but them protecting you and doing all these types of things is already hardwired far more so, far more so than this ASMR thing. Like, do dogs get ASMR? I don't think so. Do, let's see, any other mammals? That would be an interesting study, but I doubt it. I very highly doubt it. I haven't seen any evidence that, even other, higher primates have this kind of a thing. And that really does lend itself to the idea that human beings are trying very hard to socially compete with people, but also send out signals and, have good receptors for when someone is trustworthy and therefore worthy of, inviting into your very personal, intimate space. And the ASMR tingle is a fantastic signifier of that. If you're getting those signals, if someone's putting them out very effectively, then actually that's usually a very good would signify that they are those things, that they are kind and compassionate and empathetic and care about you and want you to succeed and want good things to happen for you, love you, and all these types of things. And that means that it is highly beneficial for you to have a visceral feeling of that. A visceral feeling of, yes, I can let this person in. Yes, I can trust this person. Yes, I can be intimately close with this person, and they're not going to, slit my throat and take my food. That's a great thing. And that is why I tend to think, to wrap up this controversial statement, I do think ASMR is originally, fundamentally sexual in nature, as perhaps most, arguably all, things in human psychology are. But you should be very, very, very clear that that does not mean that all ASMR is sexualized or sexualized by either the creators or the audience. It can in fact be totally non-sexualized. And I would even argue that it was, potentially non-sexual in terms of the general sort of content in these things. And that tends to be more of the, the wires crossed and there's overlap between things that allows for things to be satisfying. You look at a wonderful, beautiful, someone making chocolate or something like that. We tend to weirdly, mix those things up with sex in our brains. And again, that's not necessarily wrong. It's just a sort of, hey, look, dopamine calls for dopamine. Like calls for like, and therefore they get mixed up. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's also kind of disingenuous to basically go, no, come on. ASMR, it's just totally, it has nothing to do with any of that. It's like, come on, be serious, have a real conversation about this. If anyone wants to debate this, I'm very open to that, because I am interested in hearing other people's opinions on this. Although, I don't know, I feel like I covered pretty much all the angles on this. If not, do let me know. I'd be very happy to speak about it at any length. So, with that, I will wrap up this inaugural edition of Whisper Wednesday. And I shall say thank you. Thank you. Ooh, also, do we like this